Mosin Nagant, model 1891/30. Sergei Mosin led development from 1882 to 1891, while a commission borrowed elements from Leon Nagant's submissions. The three-line rifle, model 1891, entered service in 1891 and was modernized to the model 1891/30 pattern in 1930 as the Soviet standard. The pattern traces to Russia's push for a smokeless powder repeater after the Russo-Turkish War and the shock of facing repeaters at Pleven. Other names include Mosin's rifle Vintovka, Mosina, Mosinka, and the Western shorthand Mosin Nagant. Variants span the original infantry, dragoon, and Cossack rifles, the Model 1907 carbine, the Model 91/30 sniper builds with PE/PM, then PU optics, the Model 38 and Model 44 carbines, and numerous foreign derivatives such as the Chinese Type 53 and Finnish M/39. Chambering remained 7.62 by 54 mm R with a 2-lug, 90-degree turn bolt and a 5-round internal magazine topped from stripper clips. Typical Model 91/30 length is about 1,232 mm and mass about 4 kilograms. Wartime production simplified receivers from early hex to round. Finishes grew rough. And the Model 44 gained an integral side-folding bayonet. Issuance began as the Universal Infantry Rifle. Carbines went to engineers, artillery, and signal troops before frontline units adopted them late in the war. Sniper models with bent bolts and PU optics became fixtures in city fighting. Famous users include Lyudmila Pavlichenko and Vasily Zaitsev, while Finnish ace Simo Heiha used a Mosin pattern with irons to avoid glare. Production surpassed 30 million across Russian and Soviet runs, with Tula and Ijevsk dominating output alongside earlier contracts at Sestroretsk, Châtellerault, Remington, and New England Westinghouse. Post-war service persisted worldwide. The USSR replaced it with the SKS and then the AK series. But the platform continued in reserve, ceremonial, and aid roles for decades. SVT-40 Fedor Tokarev's semi-automatic rifle program began with the SVT-38 in 1938. The improved SVT-40 standardized in 1940 and entered service intending to replace the Mosin. The goal was to raise infantry firepower without abandoning the full-power 7.62 by 54 mm R cartridge. Designations include SVT-38, SVT-40, a PU-scoped sniper version, and the AVT-40 Select Fire variant built briefly in 1942. German records listed captured examples as Selbstladegewehr 258 R/259 R. Experimental carbines and silenced prototypes never reached full adoption. The rifle used a short-stroke gas piston and tilting bolt with an open-top receiver that allowed topping the 10-round detachable magazine with 5-round Mosin chargers. Typical mass hovered under 4 kilograms and overall length a little over 1.2 meters. Muzzle velocity with light ball was around the mid-800s in meters per second. Issuance concentrated among NCOS, naval infantry, and better-trained formations because the mechanism demanded attention and spares. Battlefield feedback cited gas fouling and fragile stocks, and sniper builds were curtailed in 1942 due to bedding and accuracy inconsistency. The AVT's automatic mode proved destructive to barrels and receivers and was soon forbidden. Production ran to roughly 1.5 million across Tula, Ijevsk, and Podolsk. Short of pre-war ambitions as factories reprioritized Mosins and submachine guns. Captured rifles informed German thinking that culminated in the G43, post-war. The SVT retreated to storage as the SKS and then the AK family offered simpler training and manufacture for mass armies. AVS-36 Sergei Simonov's Select Fire rifle entered service in the late 1930s after years of prototypes. Public debut came at the 1938 May Day Parade. But the design's window was brief as the Tokarev program gained favor, and production ended by 1940. The official name was Avtomaticheskaya Vintovka Simonova OBR 1936G, known in English as AVS-36. A limited sniper configuration used an offset PE optic. No large post-war variants emerged because the rifle gave way to Tokarev's system and later Simonov designs. The mechanism used a short-stroke piston with a vertically locking block and asymmetric flappers feeding a 15-round magazine. Weight sat around 4.3 kilograms with a muzzle brake intended to help in bursts. Even with the brake, controllable automatic fire proved unrealistic, and the rear sight loosened under gas sleeve movement, degrading accuracy. Frontline use began in small numbers in Spain and then against Japan at Khalkhin Gol, followed by the Winter War. Field reports described sensitivity to fouling and ammunition quality, and Soviet service shifted to the SVT-38/40 before Germany's 1941 invasion. Finnish forces captured several hundred and pressed them into limited use. Output likely fell between 35,000 and 65,000. The rifle's short service life still mattered. Simonov iterated the action into the semi-automatic PTRS-41 anti-tank rifle and then simplified his approach in the SKS carbine, which proved the more durable path for 7.62 by 39 in the post-war years. PPSH-41. Georgy Shpagin designed the PPSH-41 in 1941 as a stamped steel successor to the milled PPD-40. It entered service that winter, scaled rapidly through 1942, and became the Soviet archetype of close-quarters automatic fire. Names and derivatives range from the Soviet PPSH-41 to Chinese Type 50 and North Korean Type 49, with the Vietnamese K-50M shortening the barrel and adding a pistol grip and wire stock. German capture designations included MP717R, and conversions to 9x19 as MP41R used adapters and MP40 magazines. The blowback, open bolt action ran quickly, often near 1,000 per minute, and accepted a 71-round drum or a 35-round box magazine. A simple compensator in the barrel jacket reduced climb. Chrome-lined bores tolerated corrosive primers and poor cleaning, and hinged receivers simplified field stripping. Issuance extended down to platoon and squad level to create a massed short-range punch in cities, forests, and night actions. Units often mixed drums and boxes. The drum's capacity came with a cost in weight and feed sensitivity if drums and receivers were mismatched. Production reached several million by 1947 across multiple plants, with machining hours and steel per unit cut drastically through stamping. The design appeared in films and games as a visual shorthand for Stalingrad and Eastern Front street fighting. Post-war proliferation was wide. The AK took over frontline roles while the PPSH remained in reserves, militias, and export stocks for decades. PPS-43. Alexei Sudaev's compact submachine gun evolved from the PPS-42 pilot batches during the Siege of Leningrad into the PPS-43, standardized in 1943. The objective was a lighter, cheaper arm, with the same cartridge as the PPSH, but lower cyclic rate, and better portability for reconnaissance and vehicle crews. Designations include PPS-42 and PPS-43. Licensed or adapted versions appeared as Poland's ZOZ 43 and ZOZ 43/52, with a wooden stock. Finland's M/44 in 9x19 using Suomi magazines, and China's Type 54. West German Dux 53/59 derivatives followed in the early Cold War, while Vietnam's K-50M drew from both Soviet patterns. The weapon used a simple blowback action with a double-feed 35-round magazine, a robust metal folding stock, and extensive sheet steel construction. The typical rate of fire sat around 500 to 600 per minute. The result was compact, controllable, and materially efficient. with machining time far below the PPSH. Issuance focused on tank crews, scouts, signal troops, and engineers. The gun proved reliable in Leningrad's urban fighting and remained with naval infantry and armored crews into the 1950s. Production climbed into the low millions when foreign manufacture was included. Post-war, Chinese and Polish runs kept it in circulation, and the pattern appears in conflicts from Korea and Indochina to later African and Middle Eastern insurgencies. Soviet service eventually ceded the role to folding stock AKs, but the PPS lineage set a durable template for stamped, low-input small arms. TT-33 Tokarev Fedor Tokarev's service pistol traces to the TT-30 adopted in 1931 and simplified to the TT-33 soon afterward. The Red Army sought a standardized autoloader to replace mixed revolvers and imports. The TT entered service through the 1930s as industrial capacity expanded. Designations include TT-30 and TT-33, with an array of post-war national patterns, such as China's Type 51/54, Hungary's Tokagypt series in 9x19, Romania's TTC, North Korea's Type 66/68, Yugoslavia's M57 with a 9-round magazine, and Vietnamese K54 variants. Wartime Soviet pistols used wood grips and omitted some small parts to speed manufacture. The pistol is a single-action, short-recoil design with a tilting barrel and an 8-round magazine in the standard Soviet pattern. A modular hammer-sear unit simplifies assembly. Original pistols lacked manual safety. Half-cock provided the mechanical block, which shaped Soviet training habits. Issuance concentrated among officers, NCOs, and specialists, including snipers who carried the TT as a secondary. German forces reissued captures as Pistole 615 Euros, sometimes with 7.63 by 25 Mauser ammunition. Reliability notes from the field often mention stress on firing pins and the possibility of accidental magazine drops. Soviet production exceeded 1,500,000, split largely between Tula and Izhevsk. The Makarov displaced it in the 1950s, but the TT pattern remained a frequent military, police, and insurgent sidearm across Cold War clients, and it continues in service where spares and ammunition remain plentiful. Nagant Model 1895. The Russian Empire adopted Leon Nagant's revolver on May 13, 1895, after earlier Belgian and Russian trials. The design grew from late 19th century service revolver requirements and entered Soviet use through the Revolution and Civil War before semi-automatics took precedence. Names remained straightforward: Nagant Model 1895, with officers' double-action and private single-action versions. A suppressed reconnaissance configuration used the Biareamit device. Some foreign contracts used 7.5mm chamberings, but Soviet service centered on the proprietary 7.62 by 38mm R. The revolver's gas seal system is its mechanical signature. Cocking advances the cylinder forward so the cartridge mouth engages a conical forcing cone, closing the cylinder gap. The arrangement modestly increases velocity and makes suppression practical for a revolver. Reloading is slow by modern standards because extraction occurs one case at a time through a loading gate. Imperial and Soviet issue was broad, covering army, police, and security services. Heavy double-action trigger pulls were a common complaint, and the proprietary cartridge discouraged improvisation. The model appears in photographs across 2 world wars and in films that depict Tsarist and early Soviet policing. Production ran to roughly 2 million across Tula and Izhevsk. The revolver yielded frontline status to the Tokarev and then to the Makarov. But it lingered in guard and police roles for decades and entered civilian markets in large surplus lots. Modern reproductions and .22 caliber derivatives preserve its profile and the gas seal curiosity. Maxim Model 1910. Russia adopted Hiram Maxim's water-cooled machine gun in 1910, updating earlier domestic models. The Model 1910/30 modernization arrived in 1930 with revised sights and controls, and production restarted in 1941 as the USSR scaled for total war. Designations include PM Model 1910 and PM Model 1910/30, with related aircraft and naval adaptations like the PV-1, the air-cooled Maxim Tokarev, and multi-gun anti-aircraft mounts. Mounting on the shielded, wheeled Sokolov carriage gave the gun its iconic Russian silhouette and allowed mobility by horse cart, skis, or manpower. The gun is short recoil with a toggle lock, a muzzle booster, and a water jacket for sustained fire. Belts carry 250 rounds and can be cloth or metal. Rates of fire cluster near 600 per minute, with effective beaten zone work far beyond rifle range in open country. Heavy machine gun companies used the Maxim to establish interlocking fields of fire and to anchor defenses. Specialized mounts provided anti-aircraft arcs. Winter experience added a larger water jacket fill port to pack snow and ice when liquid was scarce. Crews trained to maintain a fusee spring and change barrels before accuracy suffered under heat. Output reached well into the hundreds of thousands at Tula across pre-war and wartime runs. The SG-43 Goryunov replaced it during the war on a similar wheeled carriage, but the Maxim's reputation for reliability kept it in depots and in foreign service. Stockpiles resurfaced in later conflicts when fixed defenses and belt-fed endurance outweighed weight penalties. PTRD-41. Vasily Degtyaryov's bolt-action anti-tank rifle was designed in 1941 as an emergency response to German armor. The weapon entered service the same year, paired doctrinally with Simonov's semi-automatic PTRS to give infantry an immediate, organic anti-vehicle option. The German captured designation was Panzerbüchse 783 Rs. No large family of variants developed because the role shifted quickly as armor evolved, but the basic pattern persisted with incremental production refinements. The rifle fires 14.5 by 114 mm armor-piercing ammunition from a single-shot action with a long barrel and a two-man crew. Early ammunition could perforate the side and rear armor of early and mid-war German tanks at appropriate angles and distances, and it was effective against armored cars, half-tracks, and fieldworks. Overall length exceeds 2 meters, with mass around 17 kilograms. Issuance was widespread in 1941 to 1942. As German armor thickened, crews used the rifle for anti-materiel work, harassing fire, and disabling transport and gun shields. Reports from later wars describe use against light armor and fortifications, as well as long-range interdiction of equipment and vehicles. Production approached the mid-hundreds of thousands by 1945. Captured rifles saw German service, and post-war redistribution carried the model into Korea and Southeast Asia. The role eventually passed to rocket-propelled grenades and guided systems, but the cartridge's power and the rifle's simplicity kept it in irregular use where stock survived. Berezin UB Mikhail Berezin's heavy aircraft machine gun matured from the synchronized BS accepted in 1939 into the UB Universal Berezin approved in April 1941. The UB became the Red Air Force's standard 12.7 by 108 mm aircraft gun across fixed, synchronized, and turret installations during the war. Designations specify roles UBK for wing mounts, UBS for synchronized cowl positions, and UBT for flexible turrets. The wartime family replaced older rifle-caliber solutions like KAS in many mounts and bridged the transition toward autocannons that followed late in the war and post-war. The gas-operated belt-fed mechanism advances the belt on the return stroke and uses incoming rounds to assist extraction. Typical cyclic rates ranged from roughly 800 to over 1,000 per minute, with synchronized UBS versions slower. Muzzle velocity sat a little over 800 meters per second. Pneumatic charging equipped fixed mounts, while turret guns used manual charging. Installations covered most Soviet wartime fighters and attack aircraft, from Yak and La series to the Il-2's rear position. The combination of heavy projectile mass, acceptable rate of fire, and broad mount compatibility made the gun a versatile air-to-air and air-to-ground tool, especially in pairs or mixed with cannon where airframes allowed. Production climbed steeply after 1942, reaching well into six figures by war's end across several factories. The UB's design philosophy favored replacing worn guns rather than deep overhauls, a practical choice in high-tempo air operations. Post-war, the gun's lineage contributed to the Berezin B 20-20mm cannon and influenced the VYA-23 pathway, while 12.7 by 108mm continued in ground roles with the DSHK and later NSV families. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with friends and family who appreciate firearms history, and subscribe if you'd like to see more material in this vein. Thanks for watching.